Washington Square is a novel by Henry James, published in 1880. This realism drama novel was set in the mid-19th century New York City, in the wealthy Manhattan neighborhood called Washington Square. American fiction is from the perspective of an unnamed third-person omniscient narrator. Do like and subscribe our videos. Washington Square starts by introducing Dr. Austin Sloper, a revered physician. His wife, Catherine, gives birth to a son who dies at age 3. 2 years later, she has a daughter, also named Catherine, but the difficult childbirth leads to her own death. This daughter, Catherine, is the main character of the novel. From the beginning, Dr. Sloper is disappointed in Catherine. She isn't a boy, she isn't beautiful like her mother, and she isn't intelligent like her father. He sees her as an unfortunate twist of fate. Dr. Sloper has 2 younger sisters who are very different from each other. His favorite is Elizabeth, who is married to a sensible and kind merchant named Mr. Almond. Throughout the novel, Mrs. Almond offers Dr. Sloper good advice, which he often ignores. The other sister, Lavinia, was married to a poor clergyman named Mr. Penniman, but she is now a widow. When Catherine is still young, Aunt Lavinia moves in with the Slopers. Dr. Sloper finds her overly dramatic and unrealistic, but he believes she could act as a mother figure to Catherine. The story then jumps to Catherine's late teens and early adulthood. Dr. Sloper remains disappointed in his quiet, plain-looking daughter. Though he never openly says this, his sarcastic and dismissive attitude curtails her emotional and intellectual growth. Catherine struggles to prove him wrong because he expects so little from her. At a family engagement party, Catherine meets Morris Townsend, a handsome and charming young man who has traveled the world. He is a distant cousin of the groom and unfamiliar with New York's upper-class society. Aunt Lavinia quickly takes an interest in Morris and helps spark a romance between him and Catherine. Dr. Sloper, however, sees through Morris, believing him to be a lazy opportunist looking to marry Catherine for her money. Unlike Dr. Sloper, though, Morris is kind and affectionate toward Catherine, making it difficult for her father to break them apart. Since Dr. Sloper cannot force Catherine to obey him, he tries to control her through threats. While he cannot take away the money she inherited from her mother, he vows to disinherit her from his own fortune if she marries Morris. This worries Morris, as Catherine becomes less appealing as a wife if she only has half the wealth he expected. Dr. Sloper takes her on a year-long trip to Europe to further test Catherine's loyalty, hoping the time apart will end the relationship. However, Catherine remains devoted to Morris. Meanwhile, Aunt Lavinia continues to encourage Morris, who spends time at the Sloper home but does nothing to secure a job. He eventually lies to Catherine, claiming he has become a business partner at a commodities firm. She believes him and is eager to marry. But when Morris realizes Catherine will not inherit her father's wealth, he cowardly backs out of the engagement. He later sends a 5-page letter from Philadelphia, but Catherine never shares its details. It's clear, though, that her heart is broken. Dr. Sloper, still believing Catherine is waiting for him to die so she can reunite with Morris, asks her to promise she will never marry him. Offended, Catherine refuses. Dr. Sloper dies believing she has betrayed him and donates most of his money to charity. Years later, Morris returns, assuming Catherine has been waiting for him. Aunt Lavinia lets him in, but Catherine is visibly upset and quickly dismisses him. Morris is shocked that she was not waiting for him when he made no effort to stay in touch. Catherine remains unmarried but finds fulfillment in her own interests, living a peaceful life on her own terms. Now let's discuss the important themes of Washington Square by Henry James. Washington Square is set in 1840s New York City, a growing metropolis. The novel briefly mentions the arrival of Irish immigrants fleeing the Great Famine, which worries Aunt Penniman. The city's expansion is also a theme, as the Slopers move uptown to avoid their neighborhood turning into a business district with offices, warehouses, and shipping agencies and faced with intrusion from the Irish emigrants. However, they don't move as far as Aunt Almond, whose area is still rural where pigs and chickens disported themselves. At this time, Washington Square was a middle-class neighborhood, making it a fitting setting for Dr. Sloper's focus on class and wealth, fit for a quiet and genteel retirement with established repose and all the latest improvements. The novel describes America as a country in which, to play a social part, you must either earn your income or make believe that you earn it. New York's class divisions were deepening in the mid-1800s. Dr. Sloper wasn't at the very top of high society, but his wife's fortune gave him financial security. While he was a skilled doctor, her wealth helped establish his career, meaning he didn't rely on his earnings. This purpose had not been preponderantly to make money, it had been rather to learn something and to do something. Sloper dislikes vulgarity or flashy displays of wealth, which is why he disapproves of Catherine's extravagant outfits. It made him fairly grimace, in private, to think that a child of his should be both ugly and overdressed. He enjoys luxury himself, fine cigars, a wine cellar, and year-long travels, but believes wealth should not be flaunted. His social standing comes from both hard work and inherited wealth, yet he looks down on those who openly seek riches. Morris Townsend's lack of a career makes him suspicious in Sloper's eyes. Catherine, unfamiliar with unemployed upper-class men, assumes Morris is simply searching for a job as she had never heard of a young man of the upper class in this situation. However, Morris neither earns money nor convincingly pretends to. Sloper initially claims he would accept a penniless swain who could give a good account of himself should enter the lists. He should be judged quite upon his personal merits suitor for Catherine. But when faced with Morris, he immediately dislikes him. He considers Morris a vain and self-important, and refuses to call him a gentleman, is not what I call a gentleman. He is a plausible coxcomb. Yet, Sloper struggles to explain exactly why he distrusts Morris, possibly because Sloper himself benefits from both work and inherited wealth, making his position complicated. The Slopers' move to Washington Square reflects their desire for stability in a rapidly changing city. Many wealthier families relocated uptown for a quieter life, away from businesses and working-class areas. Meanwhile, others embraced the city's fast growth, moving frequently to keep up with trends. Morris's cousin, Arthur, tells Catherine that in New York, one must move every few years to stay in modern neighborhoods. Social shifts are also evident. Aunt Penniman avoids the Battery due to Irish immigrants and recalls a restaurant with a black owner, a rare sight at the time. These societal changes mirror Dr. Sloper's unease with Morris. I say simply that you belong to the wrong category. Catherine's engagement falls apart due to pressure from her father and Morris's financial motives. While Morris may have had some feelings for Catherine, his primary concern was her wealth. The novel suggests that, in 1840s high society, financial interests often overshadowed love and personal connection. Dr. Sloper is deeply committed to discovering the truth. He wants to stop Catherine from marrying Morris but is also curious to see if she will remain loyal to her decision. Once he realizes that Morris is deceitful, he feels he must warn Catherine and convince her to change her mind. Morris and Lavinia, on the other hand, often avoid telling the full truth, though for very different reasons. Morris, while dishonest, never intended to harm Catherine. He lied to gain wealth but did not seek to break her heart. When he ultimately decides to end their engagement, he dreads telling Catherine because he knows it will hurt her. Unlike him, Dr. Sloper takes pleasure in delivering painful truths, regardless of the consequences. Morris, however, is a liar at heart. His reluctance to tell the truth isn't just about guilt, it's because deception comes naturally to him. At the start of the novel, he eagerly promotes himself as a worldly, sophisticated man, spinning grand tales that Catherine naively admires. Aunt Lavinia sees him as confident and impressive, while Catherine finds his lies artistic. Morris reinvents himself constantly, portraying his financial struggles as a noble lesson learned. He presents himself as a well-traveled language tutor, a businessman, and an investor in commodities, constantly reshaping his identity to suit the moment. Aunt Lavinia also struggles with reality, though in a different way. Like Dr. Sloper, she enjoys giving advice, but while Sloper delivers the right advice most harshly, Lavinia has a talent for consolation. She always finds hope, even in impossible situations. Her character is somewhat like Polonius from Hamlet, frequently offering contradictory advice, like urging action one moment and preaching patience the next. Lavinia is a romantic, seeing life as a grand drama. Just as Morris reinvents himself as an artist, Lavinia creates a fantasy where Catherine and Morris are destined lovers, casting herself as the director of their story. For Lavinia, truth is whatever is beautiful or dramatic. She ignores practical concerns and focuses on the emotional highs of first meetings, passionate love, and tragic partings. Even after Morris leaves, she refuses to believe that Catherine has truly moved on. She assumes Catherine's quietness must mean she is still secretly in love, misinterpreting her lack of emotion as hidden longing. By the end of the novel, Lavinia is likely disappointed that Catherine lets go of Morris so decisively and without any dramatic farewell. Lavinia's romanticized view of truth contrasts with Dr. Sloper's belief in logic and science. However, just as Lavinia distorts artistic ideals, Dr. Sloper twists logic to suit his own desires. He prides himself on being a skilled doctor, believing that his ability to diagnose patients allows him to see through Morris and expose him as a fraud. While Sloper is correct about Morris' intentions, he does not take the time to carefully prove his case. Instead, he demands Catherine believe him without question, saying, "I don't ask you to believe it, but to take it on trust." He manipulates Catherine's trust, pressures a widow into speaking badly about her own brother, and treats his daughter cruelly in the name of protecting her. His revenge on Catherine, making her suffer for disobeying him, has lasting consequences. He cannot undo her heartbreak, nor can he force her into another marriage. Even in death, he formalizes his accusations against her in his will, legally cementing his grievances. Yet despite this, his arguments remain emotionally and morally hollow.